Hello, everyone. My name is Philip. Thanks, Kim, for the introduction. And I'm the chair of the Software HSC Horizontal Committee with Toolchains and Runtimes, which Christoph is running under. We have started that committee about 9 months ago. So what we'd like to do today is give you a quick update on the progress and also a brief outlook on the challenges that we expect to be facing and addressing over the next couple of months. Software is really a central issue to the RISC-V mission. I'm very grateful to Mark to have elevated that, because RISC-V was very much driven just by hardware innovation prior to that. And when I first met the community about a year and a half ago, and today we have upgraded software to be a central component, a very important component that also helps us drive the mission on the ISA extension side to really have a foundation for software innovations and ISA innovations. And given that we have made software a central topic on this, toolchains and runtimes, which are really the underpinnings to us being able to use the RISC-V ISA and to compile for it, to fully exploited with our software, is maybe the most important, or one of the most important components. So within RISC-V International, we now have the Toolchains and Runtimes horizontal subcommittee, which helps us to bundle up all of these efforts. Christoph is the chair of that group, together with Evandro, who is his vice chair, and I'm very grateful to both of them for donating their time in order to help us structure the efforts and move them forward, coordinate with the open source community, and basically all of the good work that they've been doing. So this Toolchains and Runtimes horizontal subcommittee is really the one place where we try to coordinate all the efforts to get the compiler support up to date, to work with the upstream maintainers, to work with the upstream communities, to look at what runtime libraries we need to work with and optimize to get our virtual machines onto RISC-V, and to have very good performance tools. So as mentioned, this work was started in the middle of 2020. So we're at about 9 to 10 months now. And we are bringing together the expertise from multiple communities and from our entire membership here. And the group itself is acting as a liaison to key open source projects and to other groups. That is very important for two reasons, because RISC-V and the RISC-V software ecosystem, especially in regard to toolchains and runtimes, cannot grow without the support and the upstream support. So it doesn't help us if we're in a fragmented world and in a fragmented environment. Eventually, all of the support and all of the innovation needs to go back upstream and be there in the next GCC release or in the next LLVM release. The same goes internally. So new ISA extensions are being developed. And for all of them, it is important to give them feedback, to coordinate that, and to have a single point of contact within the RISC-V ecosystem when it comes to getting the support into the compilers, evaluating whether the new proposed extensions are going to benefit standard workloads, and so forth. So toolchains and runtimes acts as a governing committee there for all these topics, and also for a growing number of special interest groups and task groups, where Christoph is going to give you a deep overview of them. So we're bundling all of the application binary interface support there. We're working on the managed runtimes, as mentioned before, but also application domain-specific work. So one of the big challenges for us as a community is to understand what other communities need. So when we're working on RISC-V and working on the compilers, on the operating systems, on the systems as a whole, we need to understand what application domains like machine learning need and help them to get the applications over onto RISC-V. And that is another topic that is handled within the around Toolchains and Runtimes committee with two, or Christoph, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 2 or 3 groups already starting up. And And a very big upcoming topic is performance analysis and optimization, which has already found its home in certain groups, but will be an even bigger topic next year. At that point, I will hand over to Christoph to explain what is happening in detail and what the priorities are. Let me just state that with everything that's happening this year, so we are having a large set of new ISA extensions. If you just look at what the vector extension is going to add, this is a very large extension to our existing ISA. It gives really advanced features in terms of vector processing, some extension, some functionality that hasn't been seen on other architectures yet. We'll have crypto, we have the bit manipulation extensions, and all of that is also matched by the new ISA profiles. And at the same time, for the first time ever, RISC-V is going to release platform specifications, which will tie these ISA profiles, ISA extensions, and non-core requirements together to create interoperable platforms and a certain level of investment protection for software development. And all of that is really driven by the tools. And at that point, Christoph, maybe you can jump into the details here and let the attendees know what is up over the next 6 months and what we will really be pushing for here.
Okay, thank you, Philipp. Also a welcome from my side. Philipp already described our mission and how we are working, but let's look at what we are actually doing. So whenever we have new ISA extensions that bring new instructions, we need to make them available to the developers and the users. And the question is, how are we doing this? Of course, we need to change a lot of software components in the ecosystem, which is ranging from compilers like GCC or LLVM. We need to adjust the assemblers, the linkers, and also the runtime libraries like glibc. So depending on the actual extension and instructions, we need to properly find a model how to integrate this. And of course, we need to do this with the focus on several aspects like backwards compatibility and best performance. But before going into the tools itself or in the mainline branches, we need to get one step back. So what is actually happening before an ISA is ratified, an ISA extension? So what needs to be done is we need to verify that the actual instruction extension is indeed useful. So in order to do that, we need to test it against existing workloads and measure the effect. So we need extension support before the actual extension is ratified. This also allows then that certain developers or the actual task group which is working on the extension can actually experiment and improve the extension itself. Of course, the ISA extension ratification process also allows us, the software groups, to do an early review of the specification, so we can bring in our own knowledge and bring in our feedback. So we are more or less the early adopters of new extensions. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Let's have a look at the priorities for 2021. So one thing what we want to push forward is the ABI specification. So we have a dedicated group, the PSABI task group that is working on that. And typical topics which they are working on is a specification of new ABIs for example, for a floating point and our vector extensions. But they are also working on specific ABI-related behavior that's already implemented in GCC, LLVM, or the linkers, and that are simply not documented yet or written down. Another goal for 2021 is to improve the ability the availability of managed runtimes. So we have created a dedicated task group for managed runtimes, which is working close with the upstream developers for the RISC-V ports two projects where we had significant progress recently are V8 and OpenJDK. But also other runtimes show excellent improvements. Okay, and another topic where we expect quite some progress in the near future are the areas, the application domains like machine learning, graphics, and high-performance computing, where we also are creating new task groups which are addressing the individual aspects of these areas. One last thing that we are working on is code size reduction. And here we have a dedicated task group that is working on an ISA extension. And of course, here again, we have a close interwork with the compiler team, which is helping them to model all these instructions and measure the actual benefit of the work they are doing.
In fact, we're going to have a presentation later on some of their work and the statistical or the data collection that they did. And I think we should also give a shout out here to the bit manipulation group, which has just recently released their specification for public review. And that one will also serve us to reduce the code size and improve performance. And that was another area where there was compiler support needed.
Yes, and we will, of course, revisit these topics later in a panel discussion where our technical leadership team will be, which will be about, I think, in 2 hours. And meanwhile, I hope you will enjoy the upcoming talks, and I'm looking forward to see you again in the panel discussion.
So I do have the problem that I can't see the Q&A, but I see that there are 2 questions. Maybe Deb, Kim, can you help us out?
I sure can. So we have our first question. There are many extensions pending. There are many ratification like PACT SIMD. Can we expect this to be ratified this year?
I guess we're the wrong people here,
Okay.
given that we only sign off on one aspect of that. You might want to upgrade Mark if we want to answer this here. Otherwise, I guess it would be wise to ask that in one of the, or in the working groups and in the ISA committees.
Okay, so Deb, if you can upgrade Mark while I go on to the next, Mark can answer that in chat. And then does RISC-V have an official guide to configure KEMU with the RISC-V vector extension support, a guide?
Christoph, I think that's a question you might be able to answer. Otherwise, please post the question to the Tech Toolchains Runtimes list. And we have the relevant people there. So all the contributors who have to push that into LLVM are on there. And the announcement that this came out is there as well. So we might have a blind spot there in terms of documentation. Best to bring it up on the list so we're aware of it, and we try our best to help out quickly.
Okay. Super. And then is SBI and firmware also handled by the Tools and Chains Runtime?
SBI and firmware are part of the platforms. I don't know if they have a forum. They have a list. It is under software, so I know what's going on there. They have a bi-weekly call, and please bring it up in the next platforms group. Most of the SBI contributors are actually there, and they're also dealing with all of the hypervisor topics. So again, just look at the tech calendar. Platforms is the place to talk about the SBI topics.
Okay, and then the last question, power consumption is a central issue in embedded device design. How does RISC-V tools help with reducing power consumption, and what can we expect moving forward into next year?
It is definitely in our parking lot. So yes, power consumption is something we've been looking at and many of the members are bringing up. Christoph, I think you've been in many code optimization meetings where this was a topic.
This was discussed in one of the code size optimization, or twice in the code size optimization task group meetings. And yes, it is indeed a topic, but of course here it is very much implementation specific. So the cost, the power consumption costs per instruction is depending very much on what's actually going on in the implementation. And it's hard for us to do estimates on that in the tool chains. So yes, we are aware of that. So what we can do is memory footprint and so on. We can optimize costs per instruction optimizations is usually not done to a very much extent.
Yeah, so a lot of that is currently on the basics. We're trying to have compact code and the lowest dynamic instruction count. That should give us good power consumption, maybe not the best one. But you're very welcome to come join us on the toolchains and runtime meetings. Power consumption is in the parking lot, and we would like to spin up a group to look into that. We currently don't have the volunteers, and volunteers are always welcome.
Okay, well, thank you, Christoph and Philip. And we are going to move on to the next presentation.